Hey family, how you doing? This is your brother Radi. Peace to you, peace to your home, peace to your family, peace to your community, peace to your ancestry, peace to uh, my community, peace to my ancestry, peace to the nation that you are and they are building. Peace also to the godly forces, great spirit above, mother earth below. This is Mtima, Radi, everybody. I'm stammering a little bit today because I want to talk to you about something. And it's a strange topic in light of some of the things that have been going on in this country. I'm going to hopefully make this very, very quick because this weekend I have a longer video that I have to record. Anyway, I want to talk to you about this concept of white mental health. I have previously made the argument, not on this channel, but to other people, that a lot of these shootings come from, first and foremost, they are done by white men. And that there are two specific places and lanes that I trace them to. The first one is white mental health. And the second one is the fact that this society has done a terrific, and the word terrific, which we often use incorrectly, actually comes from the word terrifying or terrify. It has done a terrific job of isolating individuals, isolating families from each other, isolating communities and fragmenting particularly communities and family. And this has resulted in, over the last 2.5 generations, a people that are not really grounded in anything but their isolation and fragmentation. Now, this is going to take a toll on anybody. I feel like I need to also make this statement. This video is not about empathizing with captors. It's not about empathizing with abusers. It's not about empathizing with people who have done black people wrong. This video is an attempt to explain something that is going on so we as black folks do not become trapped in a cycle which we would then perpetuate if we find great comfort in their pain and their shock as they are now moving from a, quote, majority status to a minority status. If we enable ourselves to become persuaded internally to find comfort in this destruction, we will then be inviting ourselves to partake in some of the similar circumstances which they themselves are becoming embroidered in. We cannot do that. We are a compassionate people, and we must understand that as they are now starting to crumble and fall apart by their own evils, and somewhat also not by their own evils, but by choices that they have made to ally with people who don't really care about them, that many of them are going to flee to our ranks. And if we are not there to offer an alternative vision, if we are not there to offer an alternative code of ethics, which they can then grab onto, then we are going to be pushing them back into the corner which they came out of, and they will then ally against us, and that may create such a storm which will actually move us away from our great destiny, where we will be fighting for the next century or so against this Eurasian force, which is built from Asian peoples and European peoples joined together to try to beat back this ascension of blackness. And at the conclusion of that battle, we will be victorious, but the cost will be so extraordinary that it may take us a couple hundred years to recuperate before we are able to even begin to start to put together a project well enough to organize the world. And at that time, the world may be in such straits where nobody's willing to listen to us because we allowed ourselves to be carried away by maliciousness and vindictiveness against one another. We do not want to go down this road. So, as I was saying, the over the past 2.5 generations, white people have been fragmented on a community basis and or on a community level and on a family level. And so what they then had to glom onto was consumption. And what this created then was a very vacuous being, which was not rooted in spirituality. It wasn't rooted in ethics which they could trace back 10 generations or 15 generations or 30 generations. And this, by the way, was deliberate. The psychologists in the early part of this century, not the century, but last century, were very, very, very deliberate in their writings about what needed to happen in order to bring people more or to coax people into partaking more in consumption. They knew that they had to isolate the person and get them to be individualized from their family, from their community, in order to move them into a place where they would then consume without forethought and without thinking about the cost and the benefits of what they were actually consuming. They knew this. As I was explaining to another group of people, we have seen an acceleration of this isolation over the last couple of decades. It was this isolation that led to something called grunge music. I don't know how many of you remember that from the 90s. But it was in that grunge music. And if you go and you listen to some of the popularized grunge music, what you realize, if you really let yourself absorb it, what you realize is there is this spiritual aching in that music, which I like to think of as culminating in this song that was popular for a very brief moment in 1995 called Misery by Soul Asylum. And the song is very, very, very honest. It talks about the corporations, the media corporations, the radio stations, the record companies building this machine, essentially, to mass produce this type of culture that produced misery amongst the population. Now, it might have just been part of the trend that Soul Asylum was trying to, capitalize on. But if you really listen to the song, and then you look at what was coming out and what preceded 1995, you see that there is this underlying misery that was being implemented into everybody. This quietness, this destituteness, this subservience that this music was creating. So what we seen come from that was a wholly disempowered generation of people. I mean, this really started in the 60s, but it accelerated in the 80s and in the 90s. And so you now have a group of folks that are mystified by the problems that are besetting them. They are daily reminded of what their communities used to be, but are no longer. And the dominant narrative of this era and of this country has been to blame the individual, blame the person in the mirror who you are looking at for the problems which are created. It is not the corporations, and most of these people buy into this ideology. It's not the corporations. It's not the rich people. It's not the semi-rich people. It's not the middle class. It's not the courtiers. It's not the ones who sold your communities out, the politicians. Well, they'll let them have the politicians, but it has to be Washington, not local guys. It's not the ones who sold you out. It's not conservatism. It's not the conservative ideology. It's not the progressive ideology, the liberal ideology, capitalism. It's nothing but you. It's nothing but you. And we in the black community, it's ironic that I hear a lot of these folks talking about how we can't point to mental illness as an issue when it comes to these white folks executing these mass uh, shootings. Because in the black community, we don't have to be told about how venomous, we don't have to be told about how venomous hatred is, especially self-loathing and self-hatred that is imposed onto us by the society. We don't have to be told that. We know about that. We know about the consequences of self-hatred, of having to swallow our dignity each day and being made to feel very small and unimportant. We know about what it's like to face white people each day and have them treat us like we are worthless and having to swallow that and what that does after some time to our self-esteem, our self-worth, our self-initiation, our self-ignition, our self-esteem, our mental health, our emotional health, our psychological health, our spiritual health. We know about all this. We know about always being we know, excuse me, family. We know about always being told that uh our foreparents were nothing, that they were less than nothing. We know about the cost of having been told that our people rolled over and accepted slavery without a fight. We know it's not true now, but we went generations not knowing that. We know the cost of this. And we know what violence comes from this. How we bicker with one another. We fight with one another. We tear our families apart because of this. We tear our friendships apart because of this. We have brothers killing brothers, sisters killing sisters because of this. We know about this. That's mental health. That is mental health. We have to go back to Francis Chris Welsing, we have a mental health crisis in the black community because we have horrible self-worth, self-esteem, and the like, because we have been made to feel worthless. And yet the same people who can admit this in the black community are telling me now that this is not the thing that's afflicting these killers. I want you to think about something, family. And again, I don't want you to have empathy for these people. I don't want you feeling sorry for these people. But I don't want you getting caught in that trap either. I want you to think about this. All your life, you were told that your foreparents were great. All your life, you were told that your foreparents are great. That they conquered, nope, settled this land. Yeah, they had to bust some heads to do it. But hey, the world was better for it. The world was better for it. You brought peace to the world. You brought prosperity to the world. You helped to free people all across the world. And you brought liberty to every man, woman, and child in this country. Sure, there had to be a civil war over slavery, but slavery ended. Okay, some people in the South wanted to keep slavery, so yes, they then moved to sharecropping. And then from sharecropping, there came the civil rights movement. And from the civil rights movement, things have just been perpetually getting better. Over the last 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, I'll go 20 years because that's when it's really ramped up. Actually, I apologize, 30 years because that's when it's really ramped up. You have been learning that whole myth was untrue. Not only Not only did your foreparents not behave in a great manner, but they did more than just crackheads. They were vicious. They were massively, massively vicious against innocent people. People who often did nothing but wanted to live their lives. And then you learn that not only was there slavery and then Jim Crow, but the reasons for these things was because black people, and the reason for why a lot of other white people made it here was because black people were literally stronger. And they were starting to outnumber the white population, so they had to bring more white people in. And you look and you see every day on the television these black people leaping and jumping and doing things and becoming things, and you can't anymore believe what your foreparents did, that these were lesser beings, that they were lesser beings. And now you have to look yourself in the mirror and you have to tell yourself that your foreparents were wrong, that they did a lot of wrong things, and that they left you a messed up world. And that you are not only superior, or you are not only not superior, but in many instances you felt inferior. Because black people, red people, were outnumbering you throughout the world. You're looking at statistics, and the statistics say your people who look like you were having less and less babies. In many, many places there were negative birth rates, and black people were being brought in to replace you. And everywhere you go in this country, all you could see is black and brown and red. Black and brown and red. And some yellow too, but black and brown and red. And it dawns on you, as it did Francis Cress Welsing, that white women and white men were increasingly more attracted not to other white people, but to non-white people, to black people, to brown people, to red people. And they were producing not white children, but black children, and brown children, and red children. What do you think that would do to your mental health? Especially when you realize just how violent the past was to, quote, settle this land. Your people took this land by violence. Your people raised black communities that were deemed better run than theirs by violence. They kept black people in their place by violence. They murdered, maimed, and killed for the fun of it. What do you think that does to a person's mindset, their mental capacity? What do you think it does? I'll tell you what I think it does to their mental capacity. For people, and Francis Cress Welsing talked about this, for people who already had a low view, self-image of themselves, had a very dim self-image of themselves, a self-image that made them feel inferior. For people who already had low self-esteem and self-worth when they looked at black people, I'll tell you what it did to them. It broke them. Everything you were told, every bit of that myth is a lie. Every bit of it is a lie. And now you got to deal with that. Well, I believe that a lot of these white men just said, well, if it worked for my grandparents, well, my great-great-great grandparents and what have you, it'll work for me. because that's who I am. And they went out and they killed and maimed and murdered, just like those before them did. Now, there's metaphysical stuff that's going on here, family, and I'm not going to really get into it now. I will, though, but not now. Because we have to see what this is, family. We have to see what this is. This is a warning to us. This is a deep warning to us. We can't get caught up here. Don't let our emotion is a powerful thing for us, and it's part of our greatest gift. But let's not get sidetracked by this. There's likely a storm coming. There's likely a storm coming. And we're going to have to muster up as much strength as we can to get through it. But on the other end of it, we're going to be free. And if we allow ourselves to take great pride in the destruction and the downfall of the Europeans, especially on this continent, we are then going to start a process that's going to be very hindering to us. We don't want to do that. So, questions, comments, concerns, I imagine you have some. Leave them below. Again, this isn't about empathizing with them and making you feel sorry for them. I don't want you getting caught in this cycle. Have compassion for them, the people who have been injured, and if you must, be angry for a certain, small bit of time at these killers. But realize our role here, like Wade Noble said, and if you don't know who he is, look him up. Our goal here is to show people how to be human. We are human. The Hopis say we are going from the animal era to the human era. If we can't get this right, family, nobody will. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.